All right. Well,
Uh,
let's
we,
begin with you.
hey, Bez. We met really briefly in Chino at the paintball, just in passing. But
Okay.
yeah, so yeah, I've been following this little corner for close to 4 years now. So
Okay.
it's really exciting. Before, just so I don't forget this before the end of the podcast, I sent you a clip of I used to be really into the Sam Harris podcast,
Oh,
and
ooh, now I'm
so I
really interested.
Yeah, which is funny now, honestly. That's the one of the funny parts is now it's like it's all a dream. Like I haven't listened to it or even thought about it in a long time, but I can tell you that there was a period of time where I'd listened to almost every episode, which would probably put it around like 130 episodes of
Wow.
so but I mean the ironic thing is now I couldn't almost tell you anything about that podcast or what I'd listened to. There are a few things I actually did. I did his meditation app as well. So, and to a degree, I mean, I did Vervaeke's meditation session, and I found that somewhat helpful at Chino. So I do think that there is something there. Um, but the thing that came to mind when I was listening to some of your thoughts on Sam Harris just burst into my head. The me remembering this is when I was like really into it, big believer, enjoyed it, and he had Richard Dawkins on. And Richard Dawkins, he took Richard Dawkins through a guided meditation. And Richard, like, it was like two ships in the night. And it was one of the funny, like, because I was like, I was a member of the app. I'd read Waking Up by Sam Harris. Da, 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 and I was like, why can't he seem to understand? Like, what are you talking about, Richard? And, that, like, I hadn't really thought about it till you started talking, but I thought I sent you a clip that someone had clipped. It's harder to
I
find now.
remember it now because I thought that was fascinating. That
Yeah.
was so interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so just I thought with your whole thesis, it would help because I think a lot of people are sort of defensive of Sam Harris. And I think seeing that failure there of these two guys who are two of the are 50% of the four horsemen of new atheism just have a complete disconnect and sort of even the dismissive. I don't know if this is just how Dawkins speaks all the time, but semi-dismissive way he speaks to Harris is very
hmm.
funny because it's just like you're on the wrong side of the gun now, like you were, it was a lot more fun when it wasn't pointed at you, but and Harris is pulling out all the tricks, and he's like, and he ends it. I don't know if this will be in the clip I sent you. I forget if it is. He ends it with basically saying like some people are. Sam says some people are so hard-headed that they basically need psychedelics to realize what's really going on. And he has this sort of like little catty phrase he uses at the end, or I don't know, maybe it's not catty, but it's such a funny little like he's just not understanding and it's just very interesting to see that happen, sort of a friendly fire version of that happening.
Wow. That's super interesting. I'll have to, is the whole thing on YouTube or is it just an audio?
I sent you a clip that some random person had like taken onto YouTube,
Oh, okay.
and now it's a lot more complicated because I was trying to find the episode, and half of all his I forget. I stopped listening once he did like half of his episodes are behind a paywall, so randomly they all stop, and I don't know if he's taken them, but
Okay.
the clip I
That's
sent
fine.
you, I'll text you and I'll find the episode number because I found it earlier, but
Okay.
um,
That'd be
yeah, I
cool.
just thought that would be a nice little. I wanted to bring that to you because I think it would help you get your point across, and me laughing to myself, thinking like, "Wow, I guess there was a time in my life where I'd listened to a lot of Sam Harris."
Well, you're
Um,
not alone.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I don't.
Well,
I
let's
don't.
start with your story then. What
Yeah,
brought you to Sam Harris? And tell me about the household you grew up in.
yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm very lucky. I was raised in a really loving, happy family. We're still actually. I mean, right now I'm literally looking at, I live in New York City, and right now I'm literally looking at the office building my dad works in, and my other sister lives 4 minutes away from there, and my other sister
Oh,
lives 10 minutes away from there. So we're very, very close.
oh,
And
that's lovely.
so, yeah, so it's a really great home. And I grew up very much in like suburban America. One fact I like to tell is the library in my hometown is a Carnegie library. So the Carnegie Steel Fortune. he gave out a lot of funds to different institutions around the country, universities, and then a lot of small towns to open up libraries. So you can go into the town, they have a little display that shows like this was funded in this period by the Carnegie Fund. So yeah, very Americana, very happy childhood. Yeah, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think uh uh, that
Did your
all
parents go
that.
to church?
Oh yeah. So we went we went to church. We went to a Presbyterian church, and we went to semi-regularly, although I will say, just for the coherence of the story, that basically, other than a few times praying before Thanksgiving or a large meal with the whole family, I don't think I ever said said the word, asked about God to my parents or talked about
Mm.
it in any capacity. So just for clarity, we went, we had a pastor, blah, blah, blah. And, ironically, I ended up going to church a lot because I got hooked up with the audio visual team at church. But I almost, I'm sure you've seen this before, but that meant I eventually got to the point where I was cutting between the different cameras we had, and we had to deal with the local television channel that we actually got airtime, which was very cool. I got to switch on our TV, so I was playing local broadcast. But it kind of meant I didn't listen to any of the church service because I'm busy like switching between cameras, putting up the chyrons at the bottom third of the screen. So yeah, so we did have a church, and that's kind of what I thought church was, and was just the Sunday activity, and yeah, very idyllic childhood. I went to college, and really the only growing up, I was pretty much on the straight and narrow generally. I didn't do drugs, drink. So the real focus was do well in school, get to a good college, get to a good job. That was, as long as if your behavior's good, then you have no other worries than your grades and your college and your job after your college. So I'm very fortunate, very few punishments, very few headbutting with the parents. Um, and yeah, and I would say this is for later in the story, but one part of my life that in my younger years, I went to a summer camp that was 7 weeks long in Maine. So it was a sleepaway summer camp. And yeah, I think that the reason I wanted to bring that up was that camp was, well, it's now over 100 years old. And as far as imputing like a sense that values and spirit can come into a place and can come over a place, that was very educational in terms of teaching me those things, especially when I went when I was 11. I was a camper there when I was 11 to when I was 15. And then I was a counselor there for 4 more years on top of that. So when I was little, you really don't know what that you mean. You're just like, this is the place. This is how you act at the place. You wear a uniform with all the other kids. There's a single spirit. We have a big bonfire once a week.
Mm.
We line up at the beginning of the day. They play reveille. It's another very Americana place. They play
Yep.
reveille, a lot of very much in the Theodore Roosevelt tradition of sort of military and boarding school culture coming together. Um, so yeah, that was, I think, in my home life, I was left to, I mean, it was great. There was no problems, but just to explain, like there, it was sort of do what you want as long as you're not breaking any of the rules, as long as the teachers aren't calling home, you're sort of left to your own decisions. My dad worked a lot, you know, so it was pretty hands off, and I was like, great, great. And then at that summer camp, I think when I was younger, it sort of was just accepted. And then as I got older, and especially when I became a counselor, I really, really saw like, oh, this is what's happening. Oh my, and that, but we'll just go into that now. But it's so funny because I think the easiest way to explain it is once I started working there, I would go, we're a bunch of, I mean, you're a bunch of 19, 20-year-old counselors. When you're a kid, you think these people are like immortals walking among
That's right.
you.
They're
Yeah,
they're demigods. They're
yeah,
walking the earth. The guys are young and handsome, and the women are beautiful. It's like, oh, look at
Yeah.
these creatures.
Oh yeah. Even as a yeah, no, and just yeah. So you just I think when I got older, what I realized was, and it was a really good summer camp, and what I realized was when we were at the camp, the 20-year-olds, the 19-year-olds, the 24-year-olds, people running the camp acted really, really well, really actually embodied a spirit and really cared a lot and walked around all day without their phones on them for the most part. Even counselors there were a decent number of counselors for labor shortages that were hired from overseas. And even they, by the couple weeks in, were pretty like, these are the traditions. We wake up hit this time, we go. And this is a summer camp where you work a lot. You're probably pulling down a 14-hour day where you're not hard manual labor, but you're teaching tennis, you're with the kids. And by the end of it, everyone's sort of on the same page. You learn to like be around the kids without like constantly feeling like you need to nanny the kids. You can kind of talk to them. But the point here is, so when you're there, you're like, yes, you even sleep in the cabin with the kids. So you're around
Yeah.
the kids so often. But somehow you're like, yeah, that's just the life, and you're able to talk to the other counselors, but you watch your language. You don't talk about anything inappropriate. Like people take it very seriously. The ironic thing I saw was that's a good inroad for sort of the spirit. Once you left the campus, all rules were off. All the like, even people who would never curse in front of the kids, who would just, if you did anything wrong, they'd pull you aside by the scruff of your neck and they'd tell you, you don't act that way around the kids. You don't do this. And then you'd see them leave the campus and it was just like, no rules, just like whatever. And as long as you're there in the morning for flag raising with, you're cogent and you're standing up, hey, you did your thing. That's kind of it. And now you're back. So there's no one's gonna ask you what you did when you were off campus. And that's when I realized, because you know, I was in college at the time. So it just you started to see this thing because I'm like, okay, when we're off the campus, you act just like any other college kid I know. And most of these college kids I wouldn't trust to watch my house plants. I don't, like I don't have a problem with them, but I'm like, yeah, I'd leave my cat to its own devices rather than have you coming around. Like I don't want you to, and then but the second you get back onto the campus, it's just, obviously no one's perfect. There are definitely some times where like some stories, legends of bad behavior and whatnot, but for the most part, I was shockingly, everyone cared, everyone kept the traditions. I mean, there were days off. You had one day off a week, 7 days you worked, or 6 days you worked, one day off. And there were days where I would come back from my day off to watch a soccer tournament that was happening on campus. Like I would go out of my way to come back to the campus because I'm like, yeah, sure, I could go out and get a lunch or catch a movie or whatever. But I'm part of the community. I want to watch the tournament. I want to see how the 15-year-olds do against the other camp's 15-year-olds. So yeah, I think that summer camp experience, especially, it was funny because as a camper, I wasn't a standout athlete. I was sort of just like, fine, not, liked, not a bad behavior kid. But throughout my time as being a counselor, like by the end of it, I basically was just like, oh yeah, like you're one of the leaders. I mean, in official title, I was a head
Sure.
counselor, but also just in terms of the way people treated me and the way, like, if there's a problem, you could be looked to. And the thing I don't want to point out, like, oh, wow, because I'm so great. The thing that really got to me, or the thing that really struck me is I never thought, like, I always thought, like, I'm not the greatest athlete. I'm going to work at this summer camp because it's a paycheck and it'll be fun. But I just did the things that I thought were right. I was like, oh, I'm going to read to my campers. And, if something's going wrong, you step in and da da da. And, you just do that. Like, I'm just like, I was like, I would get my head buzzed before the summer because I was like, I don't want to worry about my hair. I'm just here for the campers. And then somehow, without me knowing, it was just like suddenly people like, oh yeah, that's the person to turn to. That's the person who'll know what to do. And that really, by the end of it, it struck me of like, oh, something was going on. It's something I can't put into words was happening here. And that alignment of what you think is the right thing to do personally, not just like, oh, well, be the strongest guy or like, be this, be that, but like, I'm just going to do the things that I consider to be right. And then the people around me are going to treat me a certain way based on that. like that alignment between those two ideas just suddenly, like, it took a while, but it just hit me of like, oh, what is happening here? And so my last summer there was actually literally like 3 weeks before I started my first job out of college. So I was able to negotiate with my job that it didn't start in June. I
So
instead
that was
started
your summer job,
in
like in the
college.
college years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah,
That is a great story, and that is a great illustration. I don't know what you're planning on doing with this video, but maybe, I mean, that what you just laid out and how well you told it, that is such an excellent illustration of a spirit and its locale, and its tradition, and how you know, and the one, oh, that I can, I mean, I can so see that. That's so true.
yeah. Yeah, no, and just to like, I mean, I have so many stories from this place. I spent so many hundreds of hours,
Yeah,
thousands of hours. And it's funny, the last day of camp, we would take the docks out. Like you really pull them because the lake will freeze and it'll
right,
destroy the docks if you leave it in.
right. I mean, it's
You pull
Maine.
everything. Yeah, it's Maine. You pull everything on land, you pull it, put everything away. And I remember because I did that, yeah, 3, 4 years of doing that. And I remember that's the last night. Then you have steak and lobster. They treat you to a really nice dinner because all the kids are gone. And it's funny when the last camper leaves, it's sort of a joke, but it's sort of not. Everyone just starts partying because it's like the kids are gone, like we can do whatever, like it's over, like and like the last you wave to the last kid. They when they leave the campus, you wait, take a breath, and then you play the explicit music. As one, of course, one counselor has explicit music that he's playing on the speaker, and and like blah blah blah, and like we're partying, nothing crazy, but everyone's like, yeah, now it's adult time. But you pull everything down, and just barely maybe 24 hours ago, you were celebrating that all the kids are gone, and now it's young adult time or whatever, college kid time. And then like the spirit of the place when you look at it, and all this stuff has been taken down, and the goals for the soccer have been put away, and I'm like, and the flag that's on the flagpole is gone. I just was like, I have no belonging here. I need to get away from this place. Not like intensely, but it's just like it's what are these buildings? Like, what do they mean? Like,
Yes.
there's even the sacred space. We have the whole hill where they have the bonfire and the hill stacked. We have these things called ghost rocks where you put your name on a rock and put it on the hill. So we have hundreds, thousands, probably thousands of rocks on this hill that have been painted. But even the Ghost Rock Hill, like it's like that's just a bunch of rubble that you put on a hill. It's just
It's tradition.
and yeah, of course, during the year, it's so you look for your old ghost rocks. I could, you'd still find your ones from when you made when you were 11 years old, and
Yeah.
but then when you like that last day, it's so gut wrenching of like
Yeah.
this is just a place, this is just a field that will be sold one day. And I
Yeah.
don't I don't say that to be like, oh, whoa, but like it's like the
It's
the
Isaiah
thing.
40. I mean, where the flowers of the field, where the grass of the field and the grass withers and the flowers fall and places remembered no more. I mean, it's tremendously biblical.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is. So it's such and you see the plaques all over we have in the dining hall there are hundreds, if not thousands, of plaques from different competitions. We have sailing relays, tennis, and just kids' names from 1957 are on the wall. And
Yeah.
so it's
Who
yeah,
runs the
yeah.
place? Who owns the place?
It was run by a family, and then they sold it, and a trust was set up. So a lot of love and time and attention has been put into this place to keep it running for
Wow.
over 100 years. So it was
And
sort of
it's a
it's
7-week camp, so that's really your summer as a kid.
oh yeah,
I mean, when you're a kid, summer vacation seems like forever, 7 weeks feels like an eternity.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, and when I was a camper, I had a little notebook or like a piece of paper essentially, and I'd write down everything all the other campers told me about because you didn't really have access to anything. You had no phones,
Right.
and so they'd be like, "Listen to this song or play this video game," and I'd like have my little and you'd come home and you'd be like, "I've come back from the far north and I've returned with information on how to on 199 songs to buy on iTunes," and I've come back with movie recommendations and all sorts of, all sorts of goodies. So yeah, yeah, it was a whole world that was you'd go and you'd meet people and you'd commune with kids and kids from all over the world, kids from the same area you're from. You'd have a whole spirit over it. You'd have there's a running competition. The competition starts, it ends, it it so yeah, I mean, they really knew how to do, especially closings. I mean, there's a whole week of closing ceremonies where you cut off, you end everything, you end the running competition between the whole camp. There's two sides of this competition. You end that, you end the bonfires, you end, like you have camper counselor stuff, camper competitions, like traditions that span beyond competition, and then you close it, and the final night, everyone has a candle and they blow it out at the same time. Like they really, really understand, like you need to open, you need to start, you need to like everything at the beginning is all super energy, high energy, get excited. And then at the end, it's solemnity and seriousness, and everyone has a sense that this summer will be entered into like the halls of that list all the other summers. The bonfire is a tally, and you can look up tally. Like, they have a description of each bonfire and different activities that happen. So if you had a dad who went to the camp, you can look up your dad from 1965 and what did he do, and was he, so there's a huge understanding of culture and tradition, and yeah. So I mean, going through all that,
How many years did you go there as a kid, and how many years were you a counselor there?
5 as a camper and 4 as a counselor.
So that's pretty significant in a young life.
Mm,
I mean, it's 9 summers that you
yeah,
participated in this
yeah,
ritual, in this liturgy.
mm, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it really took until the last 2 summers, in fact, and really not until the last one. Um, and you just see all these beautiful things coming together. Like one that's almost like such a almost cliche example. You wouldn't even want to write it down in a book because it would sound too cliche. My last summer, every summer we do a play called Hiawatha's Departure, which I think is a takeoff of a Wordsworth play, a Wordsworth poem or novel. And my last summer, they asked me like, "Oh, you want to be Hiawatha?" And it's all about Hiawatha giving the head to the chieftain position to his son and going off into the unknown, and then at the end, and then he basically commits suicide. And it's all about like letting go of the old tradition and then the new. And even though Hiawatha was the chieftain that brought peace, it's like, well, if I can't keep doing this, someone else has to do this. So I mean, just that of the handing off of, hey, like you're a counselor who's very respected. We want you to, and in the one sense, it's like, well, this is just a job. I have to memorize lines. It's a play. I got to do work, blah, blah, blah. But in another sense, it's so epitomizes. And I'm thinking, half of you, oh, this is for the kids. This is for these kids to watch, or they're watching a play and consuming it. But I'm like, oh no, this is the wisdom of the tradition. It's actually for the counselors. It's for the adults. It's for,
Yes, yes.
and you realize, oh, and yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of stories I could tell you. And it's just so, yeah, so I wanted to bring that up because I think my life in terms of suburban high school was very much, I played a lot of video games, I did some sports, but it was very much do what you want, don't get in trouble, have fun. No one's really going to ask you what'd you get up to because the answer is going to be really boring. But this summer camp was really, and the fact, oh, and this is one more thing. No one could have made this summer camp the way it is except through tradition. There is no place where they can make you have this summer. Not even I don't care what you say about the board of trustees. I don't care what you say about the original family who owned the camp. Like, I know for a fact that this is like brought through the generations so that when people say we had like a classic summer, this is a classic. Well, what does that mean? What does that? Oh, well, all this fun stuff happened. Well, is it really the fun stuff that mattered? Well, no, it's just it felt good. It felt right. Oh, the stuff happened the way it was supposed to. All these narratives emerged of the talented, the kid with who was scared to, go in the water and then swam and, became a great swimmer, the kid who, wanted to lead this thing and start, the kid who started a band, like all these narratives that are encouraged to grow, that have a container that they can happen inside of. Um, no one has any idea if and me as someone who worked pretty high up, the staff running the camp had their hands full just getting through legal hoops and making sure all the kids were alive and making sure everyone was taken care of. The idea that they're putting the little sprinkle of magic sauce on top of everything, like, don't make me laugh. This is only because everyone knew how to behave. Well, how do you know where's the pattern? Where's the idea? Who do you point to? Where do you point to? Well, you'd point to a million things. You'd point to the bonfire hill. You'd point to the soccer field. You'd point to the plaques. Well, the plaques are just plaques. Throw them into the fire and burn them. Like there's no magic inside of them. But, all those things taught everyone how to behave, how to conduct themselves, how you act, who you are, all these little heirlooms, all these little, you know. So, and there's so many moments that would come out of that just seemed absolutely magical at the time. But the more you pry them apart, you sort of like, was there, is it really that, you could take it to one person and be like, oh, well, this happened. And they'd be like, yeah, but go on YouTube and you'll see something crazier, go on here and if you don't understand the container and the individual moments won't seem as beautiful because you don't realize, because all those moments come together to create this spirit, but you can't point to the spirit. And now I'm sort
Right.
of cheating because I'm using corner terminology, but that's sort of why I'm in the corner is I'm sure people, what do you mean spirit? What does that mean? But the spirit of the camp, the spirit of the summer was there. It came this year, so yeah, just that was such a important part of my growing up that I think
Mm.
even when I was 22 in my last summer, even then, I really didn't understand what an important role it would play in my life. Even when I did feel like, oh, I really am starting to get this, it didn't
Did your
really
parents
sink in.
go to this camp?
No, I kind of fell into it. It was like my mom's sisters, my uncle, who's not related, he's his father went.
Okay.
So I was sort of, and that's also part of me seeming, because a lot of people do go in generationally. And I
Yeah.
always thought like, well, I'm sort of, I'm not going to be like those people because I didn't have a family. You know, there were people whose parents would come and have like, they gave us something called an honor band, and it was a little thing you wore, a sash you wore to the bonfire. And some people's parents would wear those to like they drive up to Maine and have it on them. And like
Wow.
you'd see ones that had listed the year that you were first at camp. I mean, I saw grandparents and great grandparents wearing ones from the 50s.
Wow.
This is a piece of cloth that you from the 50s that you'd kept all these years. Um, yeah, and so now I just went on this whole diatribe on the
That
summer
was
camp life.
great. That was great. It was really, really good. And I'm a pastor. I'm always looking for things that communicate. And at least to me, that was up there with the wrestling conversation that I had in terms of, because spirits are difficult things to see,
Mm,
and you made that spirit visible. And a lot of, it helps that I grew up on the East Coast, because it's a very East Coast story.
yeah,
And a lot of people who now have lived most of my adult life now in California, and there are probably some analogies here, but I mean, the East had an interesting urban rural culture where they were connected. I mean, there were, of course, um there were the vacation spots up in the Catskills, and these things go, wind their way out into movies like Dirty Dancing or Meatballs, or I mean, there's these cultural artifacts that sort of point to them.
mm,
But there was, one of my kids went to high school here, and one of his classmates was a Jewish girl, and she went to her Jewish camp every summer here in
yeah,
California. And so, and what you described isn't different from my experience at wasn't a camp necessarily, but it was a campground owned by the Christian Reformed churches in Whitensville, Massachusetts, and different communities. The Christian Reformed Church sort of had this with respect to our Christian schools and
Mm,
even Calvin College. I mean, my grandfather went there, my parents went there, I went there, my sisters went there. I mean, you do, and there are these traditions and rituals that communities create. And it happens at a lot of different levels, but I think you told it beautifully in a way that you could really see the spirit and how the different elements combine, um and sort of the transjective quality of the spirit sort of back and forth. The elements don't create the spirit, but this, it's extremely difficult to sort of just to sort of lay out if you wanted a formula to create spirit. There are elements you can point, the sash, the campfire, and the ritual traditions. Yeah, those are all elements, but it's not like you're going to produce it. And
mm,
that's the nature of this thing. So it's
yeah.
not something we're in control of, and your story just really nailed it. So that was great.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And yeah, no, and you know what's funny? I don't. I think the camp's gone through a lot of changes, and it really, I won't get into all of it, but it's been hard for me to see all these changes and modernization. And I was part of the board of trustees of the, or at least associated with the board. Um, and they talked about that Hiawatha departure and getting rid of it, the play. And I remember I was there in the room with like 50, 40, 50 guys, and they're sort of like, they are, they'd already sort of made their decision anyway. So it was kind of a waste of time to even talk about it. But I remember some like, and a guy you'd expect to like be the rock, and, some of these guys, I'm like, you're going to fight, and someone just raised their hand and said, yeah, I never understood that story. The guy dies, he kills himself. Why would you tell that to kids? And I'm just thinking like why, like, what are we talking about? Like this this whole tradition, these beautiful things that we've had for 100, like maybe not, some of them are younger, some of them are 10 years, 15, 20, but this tradition we've had for a long time. This was probably 30, 40 years old at least. And you just say like, oh yeah, what was the point of that? That was kind of, I'm protecting the campers from hearing this nasty story, and aren't I doing a good job in protecting? And I'm just like, I could like I just and I just remember thinking like, they're just like, oh, and there's, they made a lot of changes, and just thinking to myself like, and they're like, oh, but don't worry, there'll be the same uh reverence that there's always been. Don't worry, there'll be the, and I just thought, you don't give the reverence. You can't mandate the reverence. You can make, I guess what? I made the kids sit through things they didn't want to sit through. You have a long presentation. Hey, Billy, sit down, blah, blah, blah. But when the kids see the fire and their eyes are fixated on it, and they, like, I can't make, hey, be reverent, have an experience in your heart right now, or else you're punished. What are you talking about? And so it was really, I don't want to get into all the gory details, but just seeing like that was just such an up close thing of like, oh, the spirit can come and the spirit can go,
Yes.
and like you don't get to tell the spirit what to do.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. But the spirit
yeah,
has to be respected, and if you don't respect the spirit, it'll leave.
yeah, no, it's seeing that up close and seeing it sort of like all the gory details of when it did sort of a lot of those things changed. It just, and seeing no one really was in gonna stand up and say like, no, when England really needs King Arthur, we can pull the sword from this, we can call him back and he'll come, and you realize uh, like there's no one going to be there to be the one who, when the spirit, when you, there is no sort of in case of emergency pull fire alarm. And that's a lot of growing up, is me realizing how few fire alarms there are to pull,
Yeah.
and that, sometimes the spirit just goes, and you know uh Yeah, so I didn't mean to get it just talk about this camp, but
That
it's
was
such
great.
a it was a really beautiful time. And yeah, and it so that's me at 22. I'm driving home and I just graduated college. And it was funny, I didn't mention this, but I did a lot of comedy in college and I've done a lot of comedy since and performed stand-up and sketch comedy. And I remember when I graduated college, just so vividly thinking to myself, like, well, I'll never perform comedy again. Time to be done with comedy. Like, it just was so, it's just because you're an adult in an adult's body, you're
Yeah.
22 years old, and you're like, yeah, well, I'm, like, but how do you live your life? That algorithm you have is still just barely, it's still being refined so tremendously. And so, I was like, okay, I'm done. Time to get a real job. And I got a corporate job and everything's good. And I remember the first night in my new house. I rented a house with some friends in Virginia. Worked in DC. And just the first night, I'm like, I gotta sign up for comedy. I gotta do something. Cause that was when I was settling in and I had just like, you got the job and you're in this house in the middle of like, so I was a bad place to live. I was in like suburban Virginia. Our next door neighbors were like, 65-year-old, ladies. And I'm just like, where are we? What are we doing here? Like, what is the point of my life right now? And you're just, you've never worked in a corporate environment before. And so yeah, I mean, from there, yeah, I in that desk job is definitely where I started listening to a lot of Sam Harris podcasts and just sort of like, well, what's going on in the world? How do you think reasonably about life? How do you understand yourself and others? And I think, and definitely at the same time, started listening to Jordan Peterson and getting involved in the corner. And it's funny because all these different strands are going on at the same time because you're listening to Sam Harris. And so I had my job. I had like I started doing comedy pretty seriously, and I ended up um, working at a local theater as like a performer teacher, teaching improv comedy and sketch comedy. And yeah, I think just I had a girlfriend, I had a good job, we're grooving, life, hey, you can afford to go out to eat, support yourself, have an apartment, this is sort of what life is. I don't know what else life is supposed to be. I have everything I want and I go see my parents for the holidays and I have a good corporate job and I perform comedy and I've even like ascended a couple levels in comedy and in my career. So like what, you know, and I don't even say this in a like I was like, yeah, this is life. And I think then it's really where I can't really say what exactly was the impetus, but really started to like think there had to be some deeper understanding of life and what I wanted to do. And I think the hard part was there wasn't anything to point to be like, oh, I'm secretly an alcoholic or I have really bad anger issues. Because then, I mean, I hate to like make light of anybody's issues, but then you at least have something to point to. At least you're
That's
like,
right.
okay, but this is not supposed to be happening. But if you like did a camera recording of like my life, you'd be like, okay, he wakes up at like 8 o'clock and or 7:30 and gets in his car and gets to work and reheats his lunch and and even like I liked a lot of the stuff I was doing and enjoyed it. And it was hard because I was very seriously dating a girl at the time, and it just like everything's going good, life's good, and to get to the point where I just couldn't imagine staying there. And, there were at that point, I really had like a dream about it. And I'm not someone who has a lot of spiritual or dream-like things. So saying I had a dream about it is like someone telling me their horoscope said something. So that's the way I view dream stuff usually. But it really was something where I'm like, I gotta. So yeah, I mean, I literally packed everything I owned into my car, drove to my girlfriend's house, broke up with her, got in my car, and drove to New York City and lived with my parents, or drove to New Jersey and lived with my parents.
Wow.
So,
It's the reverse of Abraham's calling.
yeah, Abraham's going. No, it was like, and so I got, you know, this was, I mean, I like to laugh at this, but this was like a really, really difficult period in my life where I
Yes,
really,
I can believe that. You sort of took your life that a lot of people would really love to have, and you said, nope, not anymore. Moving back in
yeah,
with my parents.
yeah, and
And what? How did your parents? What did your parents say?
well, well, there are two sides of this, and I think my parents weren't huge fans of my current girlfriend. Not that she was anything. She was totally. I mean, if anything, she was super smart. Like, but my mom literally. Oh, you'll appreciate this. My mom literally came to my apartment like a day before I came up because I had said, "Oh, I'm moving," blah blah blah. I told them my plan, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna come down and help." And I lived on the back side of an apartment, and there was a door to the alleyway behind. And my mom just, I had a bunch of like random stuff you acquire, bookshelves and buy off Craigslist for $15. My mom took my desk, threw it off the balcony in the direction of the dumpster, and just smashed my desk into a jillion pieces. And my mom's like, "Okay, you're done.
Oh,
Time to
I
go."
love your mom.
And she's just like, and I'm thinking, like, I paid $40 on Craigslist. It's a $40 desk. I'm like, because I'm still like, I have a decent job, but I'm like, I can't be throwing away desks out the window. I still need.
Out,
But
out. Cast that desk out.
yeah, so they, yeah. So they were very like, they're very loving and they want me close to home and
Of
are always
course.
protective of me. So, they're very happy just to have me home. Um, yeah, and you're home. I'm like, okay, I joined a CrossFit gym when I'm living at home. I started this new career. I'm like, okay, here we go. Time to 2.0, bigger and better. And just the new job I had was just brutal. Like it was not what I was supposed to do. I'm not good at that. It was in marketing, but it was in like client relations. So it's very like meetings and emails and all that side of it, and very not creative. And I had sort of wanted to get into like a marketing agency, advertising agency, because I was like, oh, it's more creative, but I didn't know exactly how to get into the creative side. And I sort of was like taking half steps because technically I graduated with a degree in finance. So I didn't really know how I was going to get over what was going to happen. But yeah, so you take this job where you're just failing every day, and there are a lot of in I'm sure type A people. Type A people don't like it when you're not good at your job and you work for them. And they kind of let you know that you're not doing a good job. And it's kind of almost impossible for them to not let you know you're not doing a good job. So, I'm not doing a good job. I know I'm not doing a good job. I'm shocked they haven't fired me. I was going to get in shape. I was going to pursue comedy in New York City. I can't get an audition for a team, or I can't, get a break on the open mic scene to save my life. And, you're these things and you're so certain and you're like, well, not even that there was certainty, but there was a point where one of my parents told me like, and I was really like basically depressed and not happy. And one of my parents is basically like, I'm like, trying to explain what I'm going through, and me and my parents aren't great about talking about any, these sorts of issues. So I'm trying to explain, and one of my parents is just like, yeah, like, have you ever thought about like going back? Because you seemed really happy, and it just
I can't, Mom. You threw my desk off the porch.
yeah, my desk
No
is
turning
maybe
back.
I need some super glue or something.
Cross the Rubicon with that desk, Mom.
Oh my God. I'll tell you one more thing. Just like, I mean, So there's definitely a guy who dealt drugs in my building, and
Uh-huh.
I think the guys who sold him the drugs deal were literally standing outside of the alleyway when we were moving. And my mom's just pulling stuff into the car and being like, "Oh, hi!" And these two like 6'5" Jamaican guys were like literally asked me like, "Where's your upstairs neighbor?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, the guy who sells drugs." And my mom's like making chit chat with them and like very like, so that was, that was definitely like a slice of just like absurd comedy where, these two drug dealers are watching me move my stuff and watching me throw things out the window and yeah. So, but when my, when you hear like, oh, well, you seem so like happy, like there definitely was like something I was looking for when I left. And that moment of like, well, maybe you should go back. Like it was like the Israelites like leaving Egypt and you're just and you like you know and it's so funny because like what God's done in my life, you realize how thankful you are.
Yeah.
And sort of can't believe you doubted him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, what has God done in your life?
yeah, it the so um I worked at a certain sorry. I worked at this advertising agency, and then I'm doing this type A administrative, not administrative, but client relations, and I'm flailing. And honestly, I definitely should have been fired 100%. There's so many people who in the door, out the door within 4 months get fired just because they're not a good fit. I don't know. They weren't nice to me, but they didn't fire me. So I don't know what that means. But there came an opportunity, and once you get the foot in the door, and this is the funny thing is, if I just tried to get a creative like writing job from off the bat, I probably would have never gotten the job. But because I went through the side door and got this job, they were so desperate for writers. They're like, oh, basically, if you know how. And the funny thing is, I had been so bad they hadn't given me any responsibility, so I didn't know, and I basically knew nothing. And they still gave me the like, okay, you can have this other job, which is a hilarious, like, oh, okay. So, and this is the funny thing is I started doing this job where I'm writing, and of course you're not doing that much writing to begin with. You're just doing working on like banner ads you'll see on a website, or, you know, I work in pharmaceuticals a lot, so you need to like cite everything. So you need to like find a published paper
Yeah.
and then say like on page 10, column 2, line 3, it supports this statement that our drug, doesn't cause brain tumors or
It's safe
whatever.
and effective.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're just doing that stuff. But I think um you know because I did have a finance background, and because of all this, the jumping over to a creative field and jumping over and just being like, this is who I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to put my time and attention towards, I think it gave me the courage to be like, okay, well, then you can decide what you want to do with your life,
Yeah.
in this weird way of, it sounds so like obvious or mundane, but it really was hard for me to imagine doing something creative with my life. Even though I'd been doing comedy for 4 years in college, even though I was still doing comedy, and it just was one of those things of like, yeah, that's not for, like, I don't know what you want me to say. It's not for me. And even
Yeah.
people would say me like, oh, Alan, like, I don't think you should do that. I think you should do something you're good at. I'm like, oh, you naive fool. Like, oh, sure, we'd all love to live on Candy Mountain and do writing as their career. Sure, buddy. You and me both, buddy. Like, I'll go get my writing career and then I'll just ride my unicorn home. Okay, which which is just funny because it's a very reasonable thing to say. And,
Yeah.
like my
Yeah.
career field has been really like a huge blessing in my life. And, and there's a huge, like I've been so lucky in so many ways because, it's a field where you can, grow a career and make money to support a family. And so, uh, not that I have a family or am even married, but you can do those things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think that I just bring up that because I think that really gave me the courage to be like, okay, you need to decide how you're going to live your life because no one else can make that decision.
Yeah.
And it's funny that like you want to say the big thing, you want to say like, oh, well, I converted to God and then God cured all of my life and he came in. But it's actually like the little thing
Yeah.
that points the way. And but then I realized like even recently I was thinking like in the story, the little thing, the little skill you learn at the beginning is the thing that saves the hero at the end of the story.
Yep. Yep.
His grandpa who taught him how to use an axe, learning how to
Yep.
lasso cattle. That's the thing the hero remembers in the time of crisis, and he uses it to like defeat the enemy. Like to
Indigo Montoya's father was a sword maker. Yep.
yes, yeah. So from there, I really did open up. Like once I started just like, okay, I'm having fun at work and, things are starting to work out a little bit. It really did allow me to be like, okay, it's not that crazy to take the things I'm hearing from Jordan Peterson that seriously. It doesn't make me a crazy person. And it doesn't make me some like lunatic. Oh, like yeah, I listen to him during work, but then I take out the AirPods and I'm a real person and I, make my lunch and da da da. That's real life. But
Making lunch.
yeah, it. And yeah, I think I was still pretty, even though things were good, there was that period. This is all part of a period of life where sort of, you know, um, I'm still pretty doubtful on like what's my purpose in life? What am I doing here? Like I'm, what am I, how is my life gonna end? Or not end, but like what direction is it gonna go?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think one of the big this is sort of before I switched job. Yeah, this is before I switched fields. I just remember riding the bus home in New York, and you're riding the bus home was one of the good parts of my day because you got to leave work and be alone and listen to podcasts or whatever. And I'm really, really not a like spiritual, like looking for experiences type of person. But I just remember, of like just sitting on the bus thinking like, what am I gonna eat for dinner? Blah blah blah, and just a voice came and said like basically this is gonna sound cliche, but it was just like the evil in your own heart is gonna be the evil that destroys you.
Hmm.
And I, I know that sounds over the top, or it just, but it really was in my mind. I look back and I think, you know, um, when I was trying to solve a lot of the problems I was seeing in my life, I always looked out and said like what out there is going wrong, like which path did I go down, that was what choice, what thing is out of place, like what do I need to go out and like accomplish or do to fix the problems. And it just really really made me realize like that you're you've already started with the wrong template, like it's not a thing out in the world that needs to be corrected. um and that like that inward looking at yourself and your own heart, like that's going to be the thing that like redeems your life.
Yeah.
um and so yeah, it gave me the courage, and that's skipping forward to I switched to this new writing job, and that's sort of when COVID hit. And so you know I basically moved back to my parents because they live just outside the city. And that period of my life was me working remotely during the day and then reading like Dostoevsky novels and Tolstoy and like really really I like joking around about it, but it was really, really a turbulent time in my life because that was when I sort of, realized, you know, um, I think most fundamentally, it really made me realize that the world is made up of the world is made up of good and evil. And um, when when I thought about that, I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. You're suffering, life's hard. Well, those are the bad parts of life, but the parts, um, but the good parts of life, like that, okay, there's also those parts that aren't suffering that are the good parts. Um, and it's like who is the one that mediates between those two things? And like who is the one? Um, and I read The Death of Ivan Illich, and it just makes it so clear the both that the individual doesn't mediate between good and evil because it's beyond the individual. But the individual can have a relationship with the thing that mediates between good and evil. And you know, yeah, so that was basically like 2 years of my life was sitting in my parents' attic reading The Death of Ivan Illich and A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and you know, uh, another one, Notes from the Underground Man, and then a lot of the Russians. The Grand Inquisitor was another one that was, so really me and my, my gothic mood of just sitting in my parents' attic, and, it was a refinished attic, so it was nice. But, just reading, don't look at me during COVID. No one's allowed to talk to each other. You're not allowed to have friends anymore. You're not allowed to have relationships anymore. I'm just like I'll be in my room studying the rest, You can bring my dinner to me in the attic, and I'll be in my room,
Reading
so
Russian novels.
yeah. So that was me for 2 years, but there was not much else to do. So I had the go ahead to spend 2 years, reading, listening to Jordan Peterson podcasts, and yeah, uh, and coming out of that, and as COVID was sort of abating, it was funny because I was like, okay, God is real. I believe God is real. Um, I believe in the Christian God. I believe in Jesus. Um, that makes the most sense to me. That understanding of sacrificial love uh, makes sense to me. Okay, now what do I do? And the first thing I thought was like the one place I cannot go is church because they'll just muck everything up. Because I, going to a church that was sort of very liberal
Yeah,
Presbyterian,
yeah.
like honestly, whatever. I don't want to get into it, but it was just like, yeah, I'm not going to let them touch this because I see Jesus, you know, I see the God on the riverbank, like you say in
Yeah,
that book.
yeah.
I'm seeing it, and I can't. If I let go, he might go away. So I gotta attend to God in front of me. And the funny thing was, I was listening to a fitness podcast, and they had a commercial for another Christian fitness podcast, but they're like, and we have local chapters. And I'm like, oh, I'm in New York City. What are the odds? So my first place to go was a Christian fitness club where we're just like in the middle of Astoria Park in Brooklyn, running laps, and then at the end spending 20 minutes like reading a Bible verse and then chit-chatting with each other. And it's funny thing is because all those people are like, I want, they're going because they're like, oh, I want to be fit and I want to have friends. And I'm just like, I got books, and I just probably freaked out half the people there. And like, do you know that Kierkegaardian leap of faith, and let's look at Abraham and Isaac and the Mount Moriah, and
Oh
I'm sure they're all
gosh.
like, I wish he would leave our group, please. I wish he would stop coming.
This is not the kind of Christian-y stuff we want.
That's one of the unfortunate things is like that was in Kierkegaard's analysis of Abraham and Isaac was like, oh, I was super into it. I was like, oh, yes, like faith is begins precisely where under reason ends. Like, oh yeah, like that, coming out of the Sam Harris verse, like it's so that leap of faith and that like trusting God more than you trust yourself, like all that made so much sense. And hopefully I held it together. I know there were moments where I didn't hold it together, but I hope I didn't freak everyone I spoke to out immediately.
They
But
probably just kind of looked at you and never mind. You keep going. I don't understand any of this, and it's not worth my time. I'm moving on.
yeah, so and from there, this is actually funny. The guy who ran it obviously was like, well, I got to get you in church, and he took me. He said he was going to take me to two other churches, and both times he had to drop out. And then the third time he had to drop out because he was sick. But because it was COVID, um um because it was COVID, I had already signed up to go like online because you had to every place. And I was like, oh, I got to be a man of my word because I already signed up. Little did I know the church didn't even track any of that. They just put it up because they had to. And yeah, I mean, I went into a church where I really felt that the word of God was taken very seriously. And like, they really, I mean, funnily enough, that Sunday, the next Wednesday, so 3 days later, they had a, a they had a night where they talked about relationships, and they were super like, yeah, this is the way we believe relationships should be, and these are the parameters and these are the lines and don't cross them, and that's it. And me at the time I was like, yeah, like finally someone who's actually speaking about the things that it says in the Bible and isn't sort of embarrassed when they bring up scripture.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was the first church I went to after sort of coming to God. And yeah, I'm still there to this day. And
Wow.
that was a huge blessing, for sure. And the yeah, that's been my story. And I think it's a lot shortened. And it's funny because now it's so easy to be like, oh, well, obviously all this stuff happened and now I'm here where I am and blah blah blah. And then you have these things where like I remember a sports guy being brought up on the news, and I was like, oh, I should read his biography because I knew he was a Christian. But I didn't want to say I knew he was a Christian. That's why I want to read his biography, because I was like, even inward, I knew, no, I'm just getting this book because I want to know what he has to say about Christianity. And the idea that you read someone's book to learn about Christianity in a non-academic way was very, very nerve-wracking to me.
Hmm.
And the ironic thing is I went to the library, I looked up the book, and then I realized, oh wait, that guy isn't the Christian, it's this other guy I'm thinking of. And I literally had to catch myself and be like, okay, so if you get this other book, you do have to admit to yourself you're just reading it because he's a Christian, and you're not reading it because you saw a story about him on the news. And I had to like be like, I'm literally having this debate in my childhood library in by myself, on some old computer. And I'm just like, you know what? Forget it. I'm getting the book because I want to learn about it. And if that makes me an idiot or that makes me some sort of like fool, let me be a fool. That's fine. I'd rather that way. But it's hard. And another layer of that story is that same day I was checking out Mere Christianity, but that I could easily understand. Oh, well, I'm reading it because it's a semi-apologetic work, and I can hold the arguments at arm's length. But when you read someone's autobiography,
Yes.
that's a lot harder to keep that story at arm's length.
Yes.
It's a lot easier for me to be like, oh yeah, I'll just read this because I'll know the arguments, and then if they win the argument, guess what? The Christians win, and if they lose, they lose. But
Yep.
if you read someone's autobiography, it's like suddenly they're getting in behind the defenses. Suddenly they're getting in, and you're like, you want their story to win. You're rooting for that character. Um, so yeah, so all that, it was a long, ride, and to finally get spat out and find a church, and I'm still here. I think, praise God that I found the first church, and I was so certain I was going to make a bunch of spreadsheets and be like, this church has a good worship, but this church has this and this church. And then literally my plans went out the window, and I just was like, this is the church I'm going to be at. And, I think ultimately it was the right criteria to be like, do these people take seriously the word of God?
Yeah.
And, it's a non-denominational, kind of comes out of Pentecostalism. So very, very different than anything I had ever known.
Yeah.
Very, very different than a Presbyterian church in suburbia.
Yeah.
But they are very, very, even behind closed doors, people are very serious about their faith. And even young men are serious about their faith there.
Yeah.
So it just, and yeah, and it's been, and this is sort of a, you probably want to ask a question or whatever, but this is part of where I want to talk to the corner a little bit. Having been to some of the Chino stuff and hearing my story, I really encourage people, now that I'm hearing sort of people firm up the corner and harden it and be like, who's who in the corner? And I'm getting very nervous about who, as someone who's been in comedy for a long time, and the second that someone's comedy show makes $1,000 one night, suddenly everyone's like, well, I held the camera and and like this, you made $1,000 and you're gonna fight to the death over like your $50 share of that $1,000, and then the show, they make $1,000 two more nights, and then the show closes up shop and nothing ever is heard of it again. And I'm like, but that's not the immediate point I wanted to make. Is just I've given a lot of time, and when I went to my church, no one knew who Jordan Peterson was. No one knew who Paul Vanderklay was, Vervaeke, Peugeot. They don't know who the four horsemen of new atheism are, but they love the Lord. There's some young people that I get along with, and there's a lot of beautiful people there. And it's not just that I go. I've written 2 Christmas plays there and done a lot of cool stuff. And our pastor, I do a lot with him, and yeah, like no one says, oh, that's very Vervaekian of you to, oh, ooh, the way that we're actually transubsidiarity of the universal principles. It's like, come on, people. And I will say, not just in a like, not just in a shame way. Guys, we need you. High in openness, high in creativity, disagreeable people. You also need to be in the church. And when I listen to a lot of these podcasts, I listen to almost, I don't know, of the recent ones, I've listened to 99% of the last 6 months of PVK podcasts. Guys, I can't hear the same story any more times of like, I tried to go to church, but it was too hard. You sit in the seat and you listen, okay? It's not that hard. Enough. These people are like, well, I was reading physics, and I was reading about a subsidiarity across multiple dimensions. I'm like, you can't drink lukewarm coffee and sit in an uncomfortable seat and shake hands with 5 people afterwards. And it's like, oh, but that's impossible. It's like, enough. You're learning about, evolutionary psychology of turtles, and you can't listen to a sermon on like why you should be nice to your neighbor. Enough. And the thing is, I need you people. I go to a church that's very serious, that in its faith, and has a lot of, I need more creative, high in openness people. Okay. Well, I can't do it. I'm writing the Christmas play. I'm doing announcements. I'm doing my comedy bits, trying to open people's up to new perspectives very, very, very slowly, very gently. You don't want to scare off the conservative Christians. They're very skittish creatures. They get scared easily, but we need you guys. And you being like, well, I couldn't. It's just too scary. It's like, enough. Follow PVK's advice. Look at someone you respect. Go to their church. Look at a pastor you respect. Go to their church. Enough. An hour in the seat. Shake someone's hand. Go home. Enough. I'm tired of hearing your excuses. It's getting on my
Amen.
nerves. Yeah. 30,000 hours listening to podcasts on like evolutionary psychology of rocks, and yet you can't spend an hour in a, uncomfortable chair, enough, folks. We need you. I went to Chino. You guys were amazing. Almost everyone I spoke to was an unbelievable. Literally, I had amazing conversations with every single person I met.
It was cruel. It was great. It was great.
And then I come into church and I'm like, where are these high in openness, interesting, fun people? Enough. Okay, put your big boy pants on. I know they don't like to hear about PVK. They don't like evolutionary psychology. They don't want to hear about Jungian archetypes. But guess what? You write the Christmas play. You put the archetypes in the You put the pill in the peanut butter. You take the pill. You put it in the peanut butter. You give it to your dog. Enough. Enough, folks. We're done. We're done pretending we don't know how to give the pill to the dog. Okay, you know what a Jungian archetype is. Literally, I took the Charlie Brown Christmas play, I put some jokes in it, and suddenly we're laughing, we're chuckling, we're having a good time, we're enjoying it. I'm talking about art, I'm talking about jokes. It's not that complicated. They're nice people. They want to be your friend. Don't scare them off. So, that's definitely one thing I wanted to get of like, yeah, there was a whole process of integrating, and I'd never heard of, guess what? They do speaking in tongues in my church. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. All the Orthodox people just panicked. All the Catholic people just spit their communion wine out. I mean, it's enough. Okay, yeah. Was it weird? Did I grow up in a Presbyterian church? Yeah. Did I know what it was? No. But it's okay. We're all gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. Just go to the church. Did I knew what a miraculous healing was? Had I ever participated in one before? No. Have I done so since? Yes. Enough. Don't just be like, well, actually, I was reading St. Augustine, and just did you realize? Enough. Enough with St. Augustine to the 90-year-old woman who's asking if she can pray for healing for your wrist. Don't bring up St. Augustine for the 90-year-old lady who's asking to pray for your wrist. I'm done. I'm not playing nice anymore. So, yeah. So but we do need these high openness, high in creativity. And guess what? Some of them are high in disagreeableness. We can make it work. We can make it, we can make it jive. I'm high in disagreeableness. I like to debate at Bible study. I make it work, folks. We need you in the battle lines. So I know PVK. This is another thing, and I haven't really let you speak at all. PVK, I'm just gonna say it out loud. At first I thought it was like PVK was the old man on the mountain who's just like gardening on the side of the mountain. Secretly, PVK is smashing cinder blocks in his backyard, and he doesn't think anybody notices, but I've seen him smashing the cinder blocks, and then he puts his tunic on, and he's like, oh, it's a nice day on the mountain. And I'm like, I just saw you smashing cinder blocks in your backyard. And he's like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm buying cars for my kids. And I'm like, enough. PVK plays nice with you guys, and he doesn't tell you to go to church, and he doesn't tell you to do stuff because he knows that won't work. But guys, he's leading you to go to church, to be nice to your friends. He's not, he's playing nice by, all you high and openness people. PVK is doing you a favor by speaking in ideas and speaking in gentle terms. And, it's like the deer that you get over with, like, he's not scaring you off, but all this leads to you going to church and participating and bringing your gifts and talents to the table and growing them for the master, so that when the master returns, you did not hide your talents and bury them.
Yeah.
That's the story that's playing out. So,
yeah,
that's,
that's true. That's what's happening. And it is happening. But you're right. You're right. Yeah. I can't wait to have this played. It's so funny because some people are, I mean, it's been so funny, the drama. It's like these are grown men and they're like little girls. It's just drama.
Guys, the corner is a marketplace. Enough. The corner is a marketplace. People come. If I had come and people immediately had been telling me, like, I clicked on a PVK video because it had a thumbnail clip. Part of the thumbnail was something I was interested in. If immediately people had been like, well, you can't say this because PVK is at the top, and then there's the next layer of people, and then there are the people who talk to those people, and then there are the people, I would have been clicked out of this group in less than a microsecond. You're arguing over an anthill. Guys, I love it. I've spent literally, I spent what, close to $1,000 to go to Chino out of my own pocket. A lot of people spend a lot of money. A lot of people care about the corner. Guess what? It's open for everybody. It's a marketplace.
Yep.
Got different booze.
Yep.
The second we start being like, oh well, we're a hair's breadth away from being like Paul Vanderklay, peace be upon him. Enough, enough, enough. Pastor Paul is fine. That's the title he needs. He doesn't need this like Islamic, like, well, we can't draw Pajot, but we can use geometric patterns to represent the spirit of Pajot. Enough, enough. Okay, guys, this is not trying to fit together a bunch of Bedouin tribes into some mechanism where they can cooperate with each other. Enough. Okay, we're done.
All right.
Enjoy okay, finally, last one. There's no art for the corner. If you're a smart person, if the corner helps you, and then you go and make art, that is not art corner. That is just art you made. If you make art for the corner, it's just called garbage. Just pick it up, put it on your fridge. Your grandma will hang it on the fridge. That's not for us. If it's art for the corner, it's art for the garbage. Okay? Art is just art. Period. If the corner teaches you, if it helps you see something more clearly, and then you put that into your art, and then people like the art, great. If you make art that only can be viewed by people in the corner, that's just called garbage, and it belongs in the garbage can. And that's just the way art works. Okay? Guess what? I've done a lot of comedy. Most of my comedy goes directly in the garbage. Okay? It's bad. It wasn't good. Nobody laughed. My parents didn't even laugh at it. That's it. It goes in the garbage can. It wasn't good. It wasn't secretly great. They didn't not understand the archetypes I put into it. They didn't not understand the Petersonian, little thing that I was doing. None of that is true. It was garbage that went in the garbage can, and then you started over. So you're not going to make art for the corner. You're never going to have our own art galleries. This is not how art works. So
The Broken Clock Tower Discord is going to clip the hell out of this little rant. It is going to become branding.
Well, yeah. So that was sorry, I cut you off, but that was my little rant. Finally, so I went to church, did the church thing. It's great. God's great. God loves you. God made you. Now you need to go to church and drink lukewarm coffee and sit in the seats and participate in a real community that does not exist on Discord.
Amen. I think that's a good place to land a plane.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This was I'm gonna clip this myself because I'm gonna put this in the membership section because I'm a grifter, and I gotta get all the money out of this grift. And then I'm gonna clip this, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, I gotta watch that. Who said these things? Wait, where's my Discord password? Somebody, I gotta fix this."
You know what? And I'll only respond to the comments in behind the paywall. No, I'm just kidding. You know what? If anything, things should be less fair, okay? To those with much, more will be given. To those with nothing, everything will be taken. Okay, folks? If you're not behind the paywall, I can't help you, okay?
Well, Alan, this has been tremendous. This has been, it's so funny because every time I start a new Randos conversation and I don't, you just don't know what you're going to be facing. And it's like, what's this going to be? How's it going to go? But, like this, it's just been a delight and so much fun. And I loved your story. And yeah, and it's, so coming out are going to be some conversations that I've done just over the last few days, and people, with a little draw. It's just, people are good, and it's people. It's all about the relationships. That's all there is. I mean, we're not. There's no building that has a corner in it. I don't even want that. Just find relationships, make them go to church, have a life. That's all I want.
Wait. There's not gonna be a painting of the school of Aristotle where like Grim Grizz and Waves of Obsession, and they're gonna be holding up protractors, and they're gonna be painted on Mount Rushmore. And you're saying,
you being a Pentecostal should know that now that you have said it, you have brought it into being, and there is someone out there who is in fact going to make it.
Okay, then I'm going to name and claim that people wake up and see what the corner actually is, which is just a random set of conversations between people and not, I'm naming it and claiming it, folks. Wake up. It's just a series of YouTube channels. Have your conversations. I know high and openness people. I've listened to probably listened to 7,000 hours of podcasts between Jordan Peterson and all those guys. I love it. Love the corner. Love listening. Guys, come on. Let's be serious. Time to grow up. Time to get real. We've made tremendous progress. The corner's gone from nothing to something, but if it's going to get any better, we cannot immediately cook the baby goat in the mother's milk, because that's what we're doing, folks. It's already started. We've already started, breaking out the brush, the braising brush, got the mother's milk out and started braising the little baby lamb. Guys, enough. We're not going to cook it in its own mother's milk. We're going to keep it moving, keep it pushing. And we're going to get serious, get mature, and have some good conversations. And that's going to inform people's art that exists outside of the corner.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, Alan.
Thank you so much, Pastor Paul. So good to talk to you
again, I'm sure.
Yeah. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.